A great plot twist can take a good movie and make it an all-time classic. These are the best ones we've ever seen. When twin brothers Elias and Lucas's mother come home to their quiet lake house after cosmetic surgery on her face, the boys begin to suspect this woman isn't actually who she says she is at all. Goodnight Mommy quickly takes a dark and grotesque spiral into madness as the boys test the woman in horrifying ways, trying to prove that she is or isn't their mother. Needless to say, this movie is pretty rough. As Lanika Cruz of The Atlantic writes, "Beneath it all is the nagging and heartbreaking feeling that these boys have lost their protector. That vulnerability, combined with their isolation, their confusion, can be harder to stomach than some of the more graphic scenes." North Shore News' Julie Crawford agrees, saying, "Ripped straight from the pages of your therapist's notebook, Goodnight Mommy is a thoroughly terrifying fairy tale with a killer twist." That twist? One of the twins had been dead the whole time, a victim of an accident that has driven the surviving boy insane. The reveal tragically flips the villain and victim right before the movie blazes to a tragic end.
Usually movies are told in chronological order, but much like its protagonist, Dr. Louise Banks, arrival isn't confined to a single time. In the movie's opening, we watch Louise lose her beloved daughter to disease. Naturally, we assume this is happening early in her life, well before the renowned linguist is asked by the military to communicate with the heptapods, mysterious aliens who've landed on Earth. Her job is to translate their complex language so humans can talk with these otherworldly visitors. As she delves deeper into their circular alphabet, though, the heptapod language changes her perspective of time, allowing her to experience the past, present, and future at once. Before long, we discover that Louise actually hasn't had her child yet. Those flashbacks are actually flash forwards, visions of what's to come, courtesy of the alien language. Louise now exists outside of time, or more accurately, throughout every moment simultaneously. As a result, her perspective on concepts like love are radically altered by the heptapod's gift. Sure, she now knows that heartbreak is coming, but she heads into the future anyway, because she knows there's a lot of joy waiting there too. It might just be the most emotional twist in all of science fiction, and one that will leave you both thinking and wiping away a few tears. A Beautiful Mind finds an Oscar-nominated Russell Crowe playing John Nash, a real-life Nobel Prize-winning mathematician who lived a rather unusual life. Early in the film, Nash is drafted by Department of Defense agent William Parcher to analyze magazines and newspapers for hidden Russian codes.
You are, quite simply, the best natural code breaker I have ever seen.
It's an intense assignment, but when he's not engaged in high-stakes espionage, John seems to lead a normal life with a supportive wife and an incredibly close BFF, Charles. Whenever Charles shows up to visit, he brings along his adorable niece, Marcy, who always brings a smile to John's face. Unfortunately, of the four most important people in John's life, only one of them is actually a living, breathing human being. In reality, John is suffering from paranoid schizophrenia, and the incredibly creepy Parcher is just a hallucination. There are no secret messages, no Soviet spies lurking in the shadows, and no radium implanted in his arm. The real blow, however, is that Charles and Marcy are also products of his imagination. Unless you know the true story, the twist comes as a devastating surprise and sends this Academy Award-winning film in a disturbing direction. Colossal is one of the strangest movies ever made. This fantasy flick finds Anne Hathaway as the alcoholic Gloria, recently single and moving back to her hometown. But as the self-destructive woman soon discovers, her problems are a lot bigger than just the bottle. Gloria is psychically linked to a giant Godzilla-like monster, and whenever she stumbles across a particular playground, the kaiju mysteriously appears in the city of Seoul, South Korea.
What is he doing?
It's dancing.
Is dancing like...
Fortunately, Gloria has a good friend to help with all the booze and oversized beasts. Jason Sudeikis plays her childhood friend, a nice guy named Oscar. The moment Gloria comes back to town, Oscar does everything he can to help her feel at home. He gives her furniture for her empty house, builds her up with all sorts of compliments, and even gives her a job working at his bar, which is probably not the best place for an alcoholic to work. But then Gloria realizes there's a lot of darkness behind Oscar's winning smile. For one, he's also linked to another giant creature that appears in the South Korean capital, and while he pretends to be a good dude, we quickly learn he's a violent, manipulative control freak, more monstrous than any kaiju. And when Gloria tries to get away from this creep, he threatens to murder countless Koreans with his robot avatar.
Either you drink that beer, or I'll go take a walk through the park later.
This turn from best friend to abuser is pretty shocking, largely thanks to Sudeikis' affable persona. That said, there were probably a lot of women who saw this coming, well aware that the real world is full of Oscars. One of the most unsettling sci-fi movies ever made, Ex Machina finds a mild-mannered computer programmer named Caleb winning the contest of a lifetime. He's been picked to spend a week conducting a bizarre Turing test with his billionaire boss Nathan, played here by a super creepy show-stealing Oscar Isaac. A brilliant inventor, Nathan has created an artificial intelligence named Ava, and he wants to see if his creation can convince Caleb she's a sentient being. Caleb quickly falls under Ava's spell, and soon the programmer plans to free his crush from Nathan's grasp.
Do you have people who test you or might switch you off?
No, I
Then
don't.
why do I?
After all, the tech tycoon has her locked up and plans on essentially killing her. Plus, Nathan's interest in Ava isn't just scientific. This guy has a thing for building female robots that he can imprison and control. Using his own tech savvy, Caleb sets Ava free, and seconds later, the liberated android slices through Nathan like he's a pat of hot butter. If this was your typical sci-fi flick, Ava and Caleb would probably run off together. But in Ex Machina, things take a hard left turn when Ava locks up Caleb and leaves the screaming programmer to die of starvation. It's a gut punch of an ending, especially since Caleb seems so sympathetic. Sadly, there's a good chance that he would have jeopardized her shot at freedom in the outside world. In the end, he had to be tested and switched off after all. It's no surprise that the Armitage family are the bad guys in Get Out. When Missy Armitage and her husband Dean first meet our everyman hero, Chris Washington, they're way too friendly and far too polite, which is never a good sign in a horror movie.
By the way, I would have voted for Obama for a third term if I could. Best president in my lifetime, hands down.
I agree.
Then there's their super creepy son Jeremy, who's oozing with menace whenever he comes slinking onto the screen. But with all these racists surrounding poor Chris, his girlfriend Rose seems totally on his side. She'll definitely help him escape her family's clutches, right? Unfortunately, Rose is probably the most evil member of the entire family. After finding a box of incriminating photos, Chris starts to realize he's the victim of some really cruel catfishing, but he still desperately hopes that Rose is on his side when the Armitage clan blocks his path. He begs Rose to give him the car keys so he can escape, and for a moment, it seems like she might pick her boyfriend over her own flesh and blood. She doesn't.
Where are those keys, Rose?
You know I can't give you the keys, right, babe?
The casting here is what makes the twist work so well. According to both Allison Williams and director Jordan Peele, Williams was cast because audiences would associate her with the far less evil roles that she'd played before. Sure enough, she does indeed seem pretty harmless, right up until she doesn't. Messing around with creepy European cults is never a good idea. That's a lesson our murderous anti-hero learns the hard way in Ben Wheatley's Kill List. This disturbing horror film is centered around Jay, a family man whose marriage has fallen on hard times. And oh yeah, he makes his living as a hired killer. You've got to put food on the table somehow, and Jay stands to make a tidy paycheck by killing 3 people for a mysterious client who wants his contract signed in blood. The weird thing is, the targets don't behave like typical victims. Instead of begging for their lives, they actually thank Jay when he shows up for some hammer time. Things go from eerie to straight up hellish when Jay tries to kill his 3rd victim. Instead of finding his target, he stumbles into a cult right out of The Wicker Man. The whole assassination scheme was part of an elaborate occult ritual, and it comes to a bloody end when the pagans capture Jay, put a mask over his face, and force him to fight a cloaked hunchback. The assassin makes short work of his opponent, but after turning this guy into a shish kebab, Jay discovers a horrific truth. The hunchback is really his wife and son, kidnapped by the cult and tied together with his son on his wife's back. Jay just murdered his own family, much to the delight of the deranged cult, capping off a ghastly film with a truly gruesome ending. Bong Joon-ho's Mother has a pretty standard plot for a murder mystery. A mentally challenged young man is accused of murdering a teenage girl. The police don't have any solid evidence against him, but they need to make an arrest, so they toss the disabled man in jail and trick him into confessing. Needless to say, his devoted mother knows her son is innocent, and she goes from a mild-mannered widow to South Korea's Sherlock Holmes, chasing down leads, interrogating suspects, and putting together a case to free her son from jail. She even discovers a possible scheme involving blackmail and a mysterious old man. Now, in your typical murder mystery, the mom would discover the killer's true identity and clear her kid's name. However, Mother subverts all those expectations when the titular mom makes a simple but shocking discovery. Her son really did it. Yeah, he's a sweet kid, and yes, he's mentally disabled, but that didn't stop him from caving in a girl's head. It's a smart little twist that gets even twistier when the mom murders an eyewitness to protect her son. Mother spins every thriller trope on its head, but it also goes to show that nobody loves you like your mother. Every knife-wielding villain in a horror movie has a special talent for taking out their victims when they least expect it. But Ghostface, the sinister slasher from 1996's Scream, seems like he could pop up anywhere at any time. When the masked killer first arrives in the opening scene after terrorizing poor Drew Barrymore over the phone, he seems to be lurking around every single corner. There's no way anyone can move this quickly, but as victim after victim learns, there's no getting away from Ghostface. This dude is everywhere.
Please don't kill me, Mr. Ghostface. I want to be in the sequel.
In the big climax of Wes Craven's horror classic, we discover the secret behind Ghostface's teleporting powers. Final girl Sidney Prescott is running for her life. The mass murderer has shown up at a high school party, and he's slicing people left and right. Sidney has no clue who's under the mask, and we have plenty of suspects. Ghostface could be boyfriend Billy, horror movie fan Randy, goofball Stu, or even Sidney's own dad. There are so many suspects, and it's impossible to know who to trust. And that's when Sidney makes a horrific discovery. Her boyfriend Billy is Ghostface, and so is his best bud Stu. These two psychos are working together for a maximum kill count and providing each other with an alibi.
Movies don't create psychos. Movies make psychos more creative.
With two guys running around wearing Ghostface masks, it's no wonder this bad guy was making such good time. M. Night Shyamalan's extremely weird filmography has made him a punchline for many moviegoers, but he'll always have one indisputable claim to fame. He made The Sixth Sense, an all-time great horror movie with possibly the most famous twist in cinematic history. The film finds Bruce Willis playing Dr. Malcolm Crowe, an award-winning child psychologist. In the opening scene, he's shot by a disturbed patient he couldn't save, but a couple of months later, Crowe is walking around and seems perfectly okay. Well, his marriage is falling apart and his wife won't acknowledge his existence, so that isn't great. But at least he gets a chance at redemption by helping Cole Sear, a troubled boy who can, well, you know.
I see dead people.
However, Cole isn't the only one who can see spirits. The audience has been looking at a dead guy since the start of the movie. After trying so hard to talk to his wife, Crowe finally realizes why she won't respond. He's a ghost. That gunshot in the beginning of the film was actually fatal, and he's been a dead man walking ever since, despite never realizing it himself. It was an ending that sent shockwaves through Hollywood, and Shyamalan has been trying to recapture that glory ever since. But while a film or two has come close, The Sixth Sense still stands supreme as the perfect Shyamalan twist. Everybody knows the twist from The Empire Strikes Back. Even moviegoers who have never seen a single Star Wars movie know Darth Vader is actually Luke Skywalker's dad. The twist has permeated the pop culture consciousness and given us one of the most memorable and misquoted lines of all time.
La la la, Luke, I am your father.
Back in 1980, however, the Luke Vader revelation absolutely floored Star Wars fans. Most of the cast and crew didn't even know the truth about Luke's family tree. According to Mark Hamill, the original script read differently.
The way we filmed it, Vader said, "You don't know the truth. Obi-Wan killed your father."
Famously, only Hamill, James Earl Jones, George Lucas, and director Irvin Kershner were aware of the twist. So when Vader finally announced his parentage, everybody was gasping, from audiences to the actors themselves. And this shocking moment did a whole lot more than elicit gasps. The Dad Vader reveal sent the series in a completely new direction and laid the groundwork for countless additional Star Wars films. Has any other movie twist had such an enormous impact? The Last Jedi is one of the twistiest chapters in the entire Star Wars franchise. We learn that Rey's parents are nobodies, Big Bad Snoke gets cut in half, Luke was a Force-induced illusion the whole time. It's twist after crazy twist, but the biggest shock comes early in the film when Luke Skywalker reveals his Jedi days are done. To set the scene, we have to go back to a long time ago to 2015, when The Force Awakens was teasing audiences with the promise of Luke Skywalker. It had been over 30 years since fans had seen the beloved Jedi Knight, and the entire premise of Episode 7 involved a group of heroes searching for the legendary warrior. Finally, at the end of the film, Rey finds the bearded Skywalker standing on a majestic cliff. As that John Williams music starts to swell, Rey hands the Jedi his long-lost lightsaber, and that's where the film ends, with Rey reaching out to the hooded silent hero. Audiences had to wait 2 whole years to see what would happen, but obviously, Luke was going to take the lightsaber and lead the charge against the First Order, right? Not exactly. In the years since we last saw him, Luke has turned his back on the Force and wants the Jedi to die out. This little twist flew in the face of fans' expectations, but really, they should have listened when Yoda told us all those years ago that the Jedi were never meant to be great warriors. If Terry Gilliam, Karl Marx, Spike Lee, and Rod Serling all teamed up to make a movie, it might look like Sorry to Bother You. Written and directed by Boots Riley, this movie is absolutely insane in all the right ways, and no description can do it justice. It is without a doubt the most anti-capitalist film to ever come out of Hollywood, and it features perhaps the most deranged twist of the 21st century so far. The plot follows a promising young telemarketer named Cassius Cash Green, who finds success in sales by smooth-talking his customers using what the film calls his white voice.
Like this young blood.
Hey, Mr. Kramer, this is Langston from Regal View. I didn't catch you at the wrong time, did I?
Soon, Cash is promoted to the big time, which involves selling slaves to giant companies, and eventually he crosses paths with a psycho billionaire played by Armie Hammer, with big plans for the future of business. Up until this point, the movie has been incredibly weird, but when Cash discovers the billionaire's plans, the film absolutely loses its mind. As it turns out, the billionaire is turning people into half-human, half-horse monsters, so he can create a powerful but malleable workforce. That's right, Armie Hammer is turning people into horses. And if that wasn't wild enough, the movie ends with Cash suddenly turning into an equestrian himself. It's totally bonkers, and no matter how good you are at guessing twists, you'll never see this nightmare coming. From the Mandarin reveal in Iron Man 3 to the Thanos snap in Infinity War, the MCU had its fair share of shocking twists. One of its most jaw-dropping moments, however, comes in Spider-Man Homecoming, when Peter Parker picks up his date for the homecoming dance and finds something way more intimidating than the average suburban dad. Throughout this superhero flick, the wall crawler is trying to find a balance between homework and crime fighting, hanging out with friends and trading punches with bad guys. You can't really go to parties or participate in the academic decathlon when you've got an entire neighborhood to protect. And it's hard to get a date when you're constantly trying to fight the Vulture, a winged thief who sells weapons made with alien technology to local thugs. Eventually, Peter puts his crime fighting on pause and works up the nerve to ask his crush, Liz Allen, to the dance. He gets his suit, learns to dance, buys Liz a nice corsage, and shows up at her house ready for a fun evening. That's when the door opens to reveal the Vulture himself. As it turns out, this murderous villain just so happens to be Liz's father. Suddenly, Peter isn't worried about making a good impression. He's just worried about making it through the night alive, which becomes even more difficult when the Vulture realizes why Peter's acting even more nervous than the usual high school kid meeting his girlfriend's father.
Very lucky that he was there that day.
Good old Spider-Man.
Like Uncle Ben always used to say, with great power comes a really complicated love life.
It's us.
2 years after terrifying audiences with Get Out, Jordan Peele frightened everyone again with Us, a freakish horror film with a genuinely shocking ending. The film opens in 1986 when a young Adelaide Thomas wanders into a hall of mirrors and meets her diabolical doppelganger. Flash forward a couple of decades, and adult Adelaide is confronting her evil twin yet again. Only this time, the doppelganger, known as Red, has brought an army of scissor-wielding clones up from their underground lair, with each assigned to kill their real-world counterpart. Throughout the film, Adelaide and her family manage to outwit and defeat their doubles, and in the climactic sequence, our hero finally confronts her twisted doppelganger. But in a stunning flashback, we suddenly realize we might be rooting for the wrong person. As it turns out, Adelaide is actually the grinning doppelganger from the opening scene. When she encountered the real Adelaide in the funhouse, she strangled the girl unconscious, dragged her into an underworld of mute monsters, and then took the real Adelaide's place. So Adelaide is really Red, and Red is the real Adelaide. And this whole creepy scheme has been about getting revenge for having her life taken away. Ultimately, the twist works as commentary on issues like privilege and nature versus nurture. But in the moment, all you can really think about is picking your jaw up off the floor. The twist ending of The Usual Suspects is almost more famous than the movie itself. The entire film is narrated by Verbal Kint, sole survivor of a heist gone wrong. Verbal is a timid thug who suffers from cerebral palsy, and as he's being interrogated by customs agent Dave Kuyan, Verbal spins a story of how he and his crew were drafted by the world's most notorious criminal, an underworld boogeyman named Kaiser Sose. As Verbal tells his crazy story, Kuyan suspects Verbal's BFF, Dean Keaton, was secretly Sose, and that he betrayed all his buddies during their bloody caper. Convinced he's solved the crime, he lets Verbal walk and takes a minute to revel in his detective skills. And that's when he notices the bulletin board. Shocked, Kuyan realizes that Verbal's story was complete nonsense, and that he assembled his wild tale by pulling keywords and details from the papers and wanted posters tacked on the wall. And as Kuyan figures out he let a guilty man walk free, we see Verbal Kint morph into a new man. His limp disappears, his gnarled hand straightens out, and he starts walking with the confidence of a crook who beat the system for the millionth time. This little nobody is actually Kaiser Sose, and then, like that, he's gone. It might be the greatest trick a movie's ever pulled, and it's a kind of twist that will make you drop your coffee mug in shock. Even with hits like Memories of Murder and Snowpiercer already under his belt, Bong Joon-ho stunned audiences with Parasite, a subtle examination of the relationship between one family that has nothing, the Kims, and another that has everything, the Parks. After a friend of the young Ki-woo invites him to lie his way into the wealthy Park home to act as a tutor, Ki-woo goes one step further by getting his entire family jobs. This quickly spins a web of deception that we sense won't end well, but it's a carefully calculated deterioration of everyone's lives that makes the film the wild ride it is. Parasite is full of commentary on the toxicity of the super rich, but the societal con that sees underprivileged people fighting each other for scraps is a glue that holds the whole mess together. When the Kims begin feeling confident in the Park family's dependency, they have an audacious living room gathering while the family is away. While we expect them to be found out by the Parks, what actually happens is even more jarring. Moon Guan, whose life they ruined by getting her fired to protect their own deceit, returns, begging to be let inside. We discover she's been keeping her husband in the basement of the Park family home for years, unknown to the Parks. This is just one of the developments that signifies imminent disaster for all, and is one of the most surprising moments in a film full of reveals. Marion Crane yearns to settle down with her boyfriend Sam, but his debts are preventing them from finding happiness together. Stealing the money he needs from her job and going on the lam, she's forced to take overnight refuge at the isolated Bates Motel. There she meets what she assumes to be an overall harmless weirdo named Norman Bates, who shows her to her room. Sadly, Marion has caught the attention of his mother, Norma. Marion will never leave the hotel, while Norman is forced to cover for his mother's crimes. Psycho is easily one of director Alfred Hitchcock's most notorious thrillers, and even decades later, it's easy to see why. Though best remembered for its more shocking scenes, those only succeed due to the incredible tension building of the quieter moments. Sure, it's terrifying that women are going missing at this mysterious hotel on a lonely highway, but relaxed moments where Norman Bates casually explains his interest in taxidermy are arguably more frightening, if only in retrospect. Still, Psycho has two major twists, with the first being the surprise death of Marion, the film's point of view character, within the first half hour. Additionally, the reveal that Norman's mother has been dead all along and that Norman is channeling her in his own mind is still scary today. Friday the 13th has a unique place in film history, being an independent production that gained major distribution at a time when that was essentially unheard of. Not only spawning a huge franchise in its own right, but also helping to herald a new era of slashers. Friday the 13th is sometimes referred to as a surface-level response to Halloween, but there's a fair amount of social commentary at play in the script. Though it would be a stretch to call it nuanced, the lack of accountability at summer camps during the time is a catalyst for much of what occurs, as is the cruelty and neglect towards a disabled boy named Jason Voorhees that it allows. Though we're told that Jason drowned in the lake, the heavy boots and bulky jacket of the masked killer lead us to believe that he continues to stalk the campgrounds, killing the new teen counselors. However, it turns out that Pamela Voorhees is in fact the killer, seeking vengeance for her son's horrible death. Even if this is seldom mentioned in the franchise's many sequels, it is nonetheless a part of horror history.
Name the killer in Friday the 13th.
Jason! Jason! Jason!
I'm sorry. That's the wrong answer.
Years down the line, this twist is used as a gotcha in the opening sequence of Scream, in which the doomed Casey Becker desperately insists that the killer in Friday the 13th was Jason, only to be rudely corrected that it was in fact Mrs. Voorhees in the first film. In Miguel's home, music is banned due to his great-grandmother Imelda having been abandoned by a wayward musician many years before. The daughter of this tryst, Coco, is Miguel's elderly grandmother, her life having been in many ways decided by her father's disappearance. Miguel has a natural knack for music, but his responsibility to his family weighs heavily upon him. Idolizing the musician Ernesto de la Cruz, Miguel becomes convinced that Ernesto was his great-grandfather. This leads Miguel to announce his intention to become a musician, but his grandmother wrecks his guitar. Obtaining Ernesto's mythical guitar, Miguel gains the ability to converse with his dead relatives. Miguel forms an alliance with a ghost named Hector, renouncing his great-grandmother's blessings in favor of finding Ernesto. Though Ernesto initially welcomes Miguel's family, his deceptions are soon revealed. Indeed, Hector was actually Miguel's great-grandfather all along, and he only abandoned his family because he was poisoned to death by his jealous musical partner Ernesto. Naturally, this leads to a bittersweet conclusion, with Hector finally honored for his musical genius and reunited with Imelda and Coco, albeit in the land of the dead. The family ends the ban against music, allowing Miguel to finally pursue his dream and honor his family. Chuck Palahniuk's novel Fight Club inspired one of the best-loved cult classics of the last 25 years, with a 1999 movie version starring Edward Norton as a narrator disillusioned with the mundanity of his life. The more flamboyant Tyler Durden appears to echo his own long-held criticisms against his capitalist lifestyle, giving a mouthpiece to his anger. Together, they start Fight Club, which is exactly what it sounds like. Amassing a cult-like following of men desperately seeking something to lash out at, it's a pretty short road to extreme criminal behavior and increasingly bizarre acts of vandalism. As our narrator realizes that he's completely losing control to Tyler's chaotic vision for their Project Mayhem, Durden's girlfriend Marla drops the bomb by calling him Tyler. That's right, the narrator was actually Tyler Durden all along. Though he makes harried attempts at preventing Durden's plan of erasing debt by bombing buildings, even he is unable to stop Project Mayhem. On the plus side, he seems to expel the Durden presence from his mind, although the film wraps on a fairly ambiguous note in that regard. Either way, he realizes what a jerk he's been to Marla, and together they watch the buildings fall to the tune of the Pixies' Where Is My Mind? Taking place in what was then the far-flung futuristic year of 2022, Soylent Green has a twist so well known that even if you haven't seen the film, chances are that you know its most famous line. At first, we're only told that Soylent is a cheap, nutritious food staple that comes in several flavorful varieties, such as Soylent Red, Soylent Yellow, and the new Soylent Green. The narrative predicts a world on the verge of climate collapse that we assure you in no way resembles the actual Earth of 2022. Detective Robert Thorne is investigating the murder of a Soylent board member who appears to have been assassinated. Spoiler alert, it really does not work out great for him. Thorne's elderly friend Sol Roth discovers that Soylent Green, once made of plankton, is no longer possible to manufacture due to the effect of pollution and global warming on the ocean. Naturally, the Soylent board opts for the next best thing to plankton: human corpses. Roth dies by assisted suicide, using his last words to tell Thorne the truth. This leads to the famous final scene.
Soylent Green is people!
It's easy to take for granted what a huge deal Saw was for horror fans when it was first released. This is due in no small part to the twist ending, but the setup is where all the magic happens. It opens on a photographer named Adam and a doctor named Gordon, each chained to pipes in a room with a dead body lying face down between them. Each has a micro cassette in their pockets, with Adam's urging him to survive while Gordon's orders him to kill Adam by 6 o'clock. This leads Gordon to realize that they are in the hands of the so-called Jigsaw Killer, known for kidnapping victims and forcing them to participate in elaborate games. It turns out that Gordon is a major suspect in the Jigsaw case, having attracted the attention of Detective Tapp, who sent Adam to spy on him. This leads to a series of reveals that has the audience believing that just about every character in the film could possibly be the real Jigsaw at one point or another. Ultimately, a desperate Gordon frees himself, but only by sawing off his own foot. This in turn comes with the realization that they got everything about Jigsaw's true identity wrong. Adam looks on in horror as the corpse on the floor rises to its feet, revealing himself to be Gordon's patient, John Kramer, the real Jigsaw.
Game over!
This sleek neo-noir takes a dive back into 1950s America, introducing us to Detective Teddy Daniels and his new partner, Chuck. Together, they are investigating a psychiatric institute located on, you guessed it, Shutter Island. An inmate, Rachel Solando, who has drowned her 3 children, has gone missing, and the hospital staff is unhelpful. Daniels becomes convinced that everyone on the grounds is part of a plot to misdirect the investigation, including Chuck. This is all made worse by his constant migraines and blackouts, possibly caused by his memories of serving in the military and witnessing the atrocities at Dachau. When Rachel Solando reappears, she asserts that she's actually a psychiatrist working to develop mind control. Meanwhile, senior psychiatrist Cawley tells Daniels that he never arrived with a partner at all. Eventually, the man we knew as Chuck introduces himself as another doctor at the facility, Dr. Sheehan, informing us that Daniels is actually Andrew, a patient under their care. After Andrew failed to seek treatment for his manic-depressive wife, Dolores, she killed their children, and he killed her. This left him with overwhelming guilt, and his delusions have as such made him a prime candidate for lobotomization. Yet even as Sheehan gives the order, he is left to wonder how powerful Andrew's delusions truly are, as he calls him by the name Teddy and Andrew does not respond.
What are you thinking? How are you feeling? What have we done to each other?
If ever there was a film that is more a cascading series of twists and a linear narrative story, that would be Gone Girl, but it starts with a basic murder mystery. When his wife Amy goes missing, Nick's general disinterest in the subject raises red flags for pretty much everyone. He and Amy had an unhappy union after relocating from New York to small-town Missouri, which in turn saw him beginning an affair with a student named Andy. Things just get messier from there, with a scavenger hunt leading authorities to discover a partially burned diary in which Amy discloses her apparent fear of Nick. We soon find out, however, that Amy has been alive all this time and is simply hiding out in the Ozarks, getting her kicks by messing with everyone from afar. Considering that we were pretty ready to say goodbye to Nick for killing his wife, this is a stunning moment, but with Amy, the twists never end. Hapless exes are caught in her crossfire, as is an increasingly lost Nick. Though he and his allies get to the bottom of Amy's revenge plot eventually, they are never able to prove anything and are all well aware of her status as a master manipulator. In the end, Nick is powerless to escape her. Even as her crimes escalate, he ultimately agrees to stay with her, and the two of them face the press together, exactly as Amy wants. Barbarian writer and director Zach Krieger apparently loves twists so much that he decided to make a whole movie of them. The story begins with the nightmare scenario of hero Tess showing up to an Airbnb only to discover that a stranger named Keith is already staying there. This makes it seem like we're in for a fairly straightforward horror movie. Yet the danger that Keith might pose goes on the back burner as Tess discovers a literal torture dungeon downstairs. When Keith is brutally killed by a naked, screaming woman covered in grime, it's clear that Barbarian is not going to follow the story we expect it to. The story flips over to the homeowner, an actor named AJ, whose career is derailed when his co-star comes forward with sexual assault allegations. Though he denies this, it's clear that he did something very wrong. Returning to his property in hopes of rebuilding, he comically fails to see the danger he's in and ends up trapped in the basement with Tess. Taking a trip back in time, we see that the standard stoic conservative man who previously owned the house still lives in the tunnels below. He spent decades dragging women into the basement to torture them, with a naked woman being his offspring. There are actually still more twists to this film, but we're running out of breath, so we'll just say that Barbarian is a great reason to skip the apps and book a hotel room. Samuel Bell is hanging out on the moon alone, operating a mining facility with the assistance of a very anthropomorphized AI named Gertie. Almost right off the bat, Sam experiences delusions and nearly dies when he crashes his lunar rover. However, he has no memories of this and begins to suspect that Gertie is deceiving him. This is correct, and he discovers a doppelganger of himself at the site of the crash. Dragging his other self back to the base, he confronts Gertie, who explains that they are actually both clones. Though they are there to keep the station functional, their occasional deaths are expected by the company, which has granted Gertie the freedom to awaken new clones at will. This is a pretty huge twist in and of itself, but the film is not done with us yet. The company the Sams work for has intentionally jammed signals to prevent him from ever successfully calling for help, meaning he is trapped there indefinitely. The two Sams work together to create an escape plan, with the older version agreeing to stay behind as the younger escapes back to Earth. Though he's able to expose the company that doomed him, this ends on a fairly bittersweet note for Sam, whose wife died on Earth several years before and whose other selves begin to die around their third year of life. Director Henri-Georges Clouzot has often been referred to as the French Hitchcock, which should tell you what to expect from his most famous films. A pioneer in the realm of the thriller, Clouzot's masterwork may very well be La Diabolique. Christina, a Venezuelan immigrant, is the owner of a troubled boarding school that's run by her tyrannical husband, Michel de la Salle. Christina suffers from a heart condition that leaves her physically somewhat frail, making it difficult for her to manage either with or without her husband. Enter Nicole, a teacher with whom Michel is having an affair, who bonds with Christina due to their mutual abuse at his hands. Together, they decide that the only way to rid themselves of Michel is to kill him. However, when his body goes missing, Christina begins to suspect that Michel is still alive, haunting the grounds and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. This ends in a startling conclusion as we realize that Christina's ally Nicole never truly intended to kill Michel. Indeed, they wanted to shock Christina into a fatal heart attack, which is just what happens when Michel comes lumbering toward her one night. This doesn't work out for Nicole and Michel either, but it's impossible not to feel Christina's horror in her last moments. The finale tells us that it's possible that Christina has survived, or is at least haunting the school grounds herself. Writer-director Frank Darabont waited many years for the chance to adapt Stephen King's The Mist, a novella about a town in Maine in which the residents are suddenly surrounded by an all-encompassing fog. While this is ostensibly a simple creature feature, complete with tentacled monsters lurking in the mist that pick off residents at random, the behavior of everyday people in a crisis may be the true horror. David and his son Billy are forced to take shelter with other townspeople in a supermarket as they attempt to cope with the apparent apocalypse, although not everyone wants to work together to survive. Darabont organizes an excellent ensemble cast to deliver a message decidedly more upsetting than even the original Stephen King ending. In fact, that ending is exactly where the movie's major twist comes in. When David and some of the other residents choose to take their own lives rather than face the horror of the monsters lurking outside, he kills the others, including his child, and prepares to walk into the mist to meet his fate. But almost immediately, the mist dissipates as the military arrives and takes care of the threat with little problem. Realizing that he's killed his friends and loved ones for absolutely no reason, David screams in despair, perhaps joined by some members of the audience. M. Night Shyamalan is well known for his twists, from The Sixth Sense to The Village and beyond. One of his most precisely delivered shocks is in the film Unbreakable, which introduces us to a take on superheroes entrenched in day-to-day realism. Point of view character David is traumatized, reeling due to being left as the sole survivor of a horrific train derailment that killed 131 other passengers. Soon he meets Elijah Price, known for his physical frailty, who posits that David has superpowers and is, as such, the hero of the story. Rather than donning a cape and tights, David insists that he is no hero. More true to life, his attempts at crime fighting are messy and questionable, leaving him in the midst of an existential crisis as he tries to cope with his new reality. When he uses his powers of intuition on Price, he is stunned to find that the other man has actually orchestrated a number of apparently accidental tragedies, including the train wreck that uncovered David's powers. Using his own theories of superheroes through much of the film to inspire David, we are stunned to realize that Price is actually a supervillain. Taking on the moniker Mr. Glass, he views David as his natural opposite, as seen through the lens of comic book morality. Shades of classic ghost stories like The Turn of the Screw can be found in writer-director Alejandro Amenabar's eerie 2001 chiller The Others. Nicole Kidman stars as Grace Stewart, who lives in a vast mansion with her 2 young children in the aftermath of World War II. Because the kids are painfully sensitive to light, Grace keeps the house in darkness throughout the day. That makes it the perfect stomping ground for what appears to be the spirits of a family who lived in the house previously, although it appears that the servants who dutifully tend to Grace and the children may actually be dead as well.
I see dead people.
The twist, coming just 2 years after The Sixth Sense, is that it's Grace and her children who are deceased. A despairing Grace smothered the children and took her own life when she learned that her husband was killed in the war. The others they're seeing are actually the living family that has bought the house following the tragedy. But even though the ghostly housekeeper, Mrs. Mills, warns Grace that she'll have to learn to get along with the next occupants of the house, Grace doesn't seem quite ready to make nice as The Others comes to its haunting close. In the landmark 1968 sci-fi film Planet of the Apes, Charlton Heston stars as Taylor, an astronaut who joins a deep space mission not to just explore the galaxy, but to get away from the fellow humans he's come to despise. A time warp sends Taylor and his crew barreling 2,000 years into the future, and they crash land on a planet where evolution is flipped. Intelligent talking apes are the dominant species, and humans are mute savages. Forced to defend his species and aided by sympathetic chimpanzees who discover evidence of human civilization that existed before that of the apes, Taylor escapes death at the hands of the sinister Dr. Zaius, only to have his worst fears confirmed. He's been on Earth all along, with the apes descending after humankind wiped itself out in a nuclear war. The image of Heston falling to his knees in front of a half-buried Statue of Liberty is one of the most powerful in cinematic history, and is easily one of its greatest twist endings.
God damn you!